What's going on, y'all? It's Brady. Welcome back to Brady's Book Nook. And like I said, if you can follow the channel in a pretty linear order, you'll notice that it has been about 6 weeks since I released my last video. There's tons of different reasons for that. Had a big move coming up, which, like I said, if you notice the new filming studio, that's where I'm at now. So glad to be done with the move. Had some really good news in June, had some really bad news in June, just a lot of different factors. But the main reason for me not posting any videos in the month of June and like the first half of July was I was in a reading slump. I was just tired, I was burnt out, and like I said, I was averaging 8 to 10 books a month, like all the way up through June, and then in June I finished one book. And like I said, I was just tired of reading and was fed up with it. So I kind of, over the last month and a half, been kind of reevaluating my reading style, reevaluating what I'm reading, my whys, bunch of different reasons and a bunch of different things. So I wanted to put out a video. It's kind of like how I got out of my reading slump, and these are 8 tips that I think anyone can use when getting out of a reading slump. So the first few are going to be kind of more like tactical, like more useful, whereas the later ones are going to be more metaphysical type things that you will need to kind of work out with yourself. So first and foremost, I think the one thing you should do, your tip number 1 to get out of a reading slump, would be to grab 4 or 5 books off the shelf and read the first 3 pages, or set a page limit. So like I said, one of the things I did was I had a big book haul in June. I took I think I got probably 30 books, which there's a reason for it. But anyway, so I took 10 of those books and I read the first few pages of each and kind of got myself interested, got my feet dipped back in. No commitment to any book, because like I said, once I did that, I think I would have just put it away and not touched it. So kind of just dipping your feet in here and there, never like making yourself commit to something, but just kind of dipping in, dipping out. So read small, start small. And that also applies to this next little bit. So set a page or set a time limit. And what I mean with that, so tip number 2 is set a page or set a time limit. So when you're in a reading slump and your body is just refusing to read, one of the best things to do is to say, I'm reading 5 pages this morning. I'm waking up 10 minutes early, I'm gonna read 5 pages. And if that's all I read today, that's okay. Or you could say, I'm gonna read for 20 minutes before I go to bed. You read for your 20 minutes, and that is all you have to do. If you get into it or you want to read more, then keep on going. But at the end of the day, if you did that, you've accomplished it. Eventually, you'll kind of get back into flow. It'll kind of become more routine. I feel like that's how a lot of people start reading a ton, is by doing something like that. So, like I said, go back to your roots, kind of go to where you were. The next thing I suggest is switch up your genres. If you are someone who reads sci-fi fantasy, read a Western. Read a contemporary romance novel. If you read contemporary romance, you read kind of like smutty books. Switch it up and read a nonfiction book about an event that's happened in the last 20 years. You know, I feel like it's kind of hard for me because I'm always switching up my style and what I read, and here and there I'm bouncing all over the place. But even I found this useful. I got into Cormac McCarthy's works a lot over the past couple months, which, like, he's pretty out of my wheelhouse, kind of that transgressive literature, high literature type thing with a lot of like symbolism stuff. So I really dived into his work, one of his works, and that really just kind of hooked me in. It was something I just sped through, and it was something different. It was something I'm not used to reading, something that didn't feel like the same old, didn't feel like it was going to burn me out because it was something I hadn't experienced before. I also bought a Western. I bought some historical fiction, which I don't read a lot of, and none of those, I didn't get into any of those immediately, but I had already picked one and it kind of brought me back out of it. So switch your genre up, change it up, do something, read something that you know you may not like, or read a genre that you say you're never going to read, just to kind of mix it up. All right, the next one is to go back to your favorites. If you love a book, read it. A lot of times what happens is we get into reading all these things and going on, and we don't return to the books that we love. So whatever your favorite book is, go back to it. Even if you're going to read just your favorite segments of it, favorite little bits, go back and kind of reminisce with that book that obviously sparked your love or you fell in love with as a reader. So always go back to those favorites and use that as a way to kind of rekindle that flame that you have in you. The next thing I would do is find someone to talk about with your reading. So I know for me, something that I love doing almost as much as reading itself is talking about what I've read. That's, like I said, that's why I started this channel. That's why I've started a blog. That's why I've started a Bookstagram. I love talking about books. I just absolutely love it. There's people in my life who I can go talk to about books. And that's great. Like I said, Whitney, I have some friends, I have some co-workers who also read and stuff. So surround yourself with people who want to talk about books. And if you can't find it, there's communities online. You can always reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk about books at any given day, any time of day. It does not matter. I love it. It's something I'm always excited to talk about. And if you're a person who loves reading, you're probably the same way. It's one of the best things about reading is getting the chance to talk about these works that you love. So find someone to talk about it to. That always rekindles it. The more I talked about some of the books that I read over the past year, the more I was like, I want to get back into reading. I want to get back into reading so bad. And it kind of just stokes the fire. So, yeah. And the next thing I'd say to do is kind of an odd one, kind of strange when you think about being in a slump, and this is something to getting out, is to give yourself reading challenges. So I don't mean the traditional, here's this set number of books I have to hit, or I'm a failure, or like your endless TBRs and all these things. Like, no, go back to some of these weird ways of reading. So a lot of older books, so like all of Charles Dickens stuff was written in an original, like serialized publication. So it came out chapters at a time. And I think it would be an interesting way to read a lot of modern books. So what I would do is say, pick one of your favorite books. So pick something like a Colleen Hoover book, something like Verity, that's really high paced, a lot of cliffhangers, and tell yourself that you're allowed to read 3 chapters a week. So treat it like it's a television show that's coming out, and say that on Thursday nights, the new Verity drops and you get 3 chapters, and that's all you're treated to. You can't read past that. So you take to something that's really tense, really like high-end thriller, something that you really just want to voraciously read, but you delay that gratification and you hold off until the next week. And when you start doing this, it kind of sparks an interest. It's something different. It's something weird. It's a non-traditional, or it is a traditional, but today it's a non-traditional way of reading that I think you really get a lot of pleasure out of. And I think that's super interesting and super fun way to do things. And I did some different things like that over the last month. I would treat myself to a little chunk of a book at a time. And it's still ongoing. And I'll talk about that down the road once I finish it and talk about that experience. But it's been a very pleasurable experience up to this point. And another challenge I would give to a lot of people is I call it the +1 method. So when you're reading a book, focus on that book. Do not worry about the next book. But when you finish with that book, you should have read it thoroughly, really relished in that book. And after you finish it, that book should lead you to another book. Whether it specifically mentions something in that you go off and read. So for example, Normal People is full of literature references. When you're reading that, you should notice these references, mark that down, and then go off that. So you're treating yourself to a book. So if you really like the book that you read, you're already bouncing off of it. Or if you read an author and you really enjoyed the book, or if maybe you weren't sure how you felt about the book, or maybe you've heard good things about them and this just wasn't for you, bounce to another one of the works. Bounce to a work that was before it so you can see where they came from and how they got to this book, or read a book that came after it in their oeuvre so you can see where they are going from there and how they evolved. A bunch of different ways like this of reading can really kind of increase the pleasure and kind of increase the experience and like your ability to call yourself a well-read person. So I think those are really fun ways of kind of bouncing it off of the book that you're reading without focusing on the future and kind of challenging yourself at the same time. The last two are more of like personal things, but to each person is going to have different reasons and like what they're reading and stuff. So these are more metaphysical things that each person's got to deal with. I'm just going to tell you about my experience with them. And if you ever go through a slump, you can refer back to this and kind of feel your way through that. The next one I'd say is to question what you're reading. I know for me, I was bouncing all over the place and I was reading things because I felt like I was supposed to read them. They were popular online or they were a classic that I had to read. And I just wasn't enjoying them. And when you're reading that many books and most of what you're reading you're not loving and you're not enjoying, it makes it difficult. And especially when I was piling like a massive TBR on top of myself, it felt like it was like just suffocating, you know? It's like you couldn't even enjoy the book you're reading because you're focused on the next book. And you could never keep up with what everybody was reading what everybody was reading and what you were supposed to read and what was popular online or it was on Book Talk. Or was the book of the year 2 years ago, was a Man Booker Prize. Like I couldn't keep up, and I never will be able to. And I was trying to, and it burnt me out because I was reading books that I personally wasn't enjoying, and I was trying to read them so fast that I spent most of my time reading books I didn't enjoy. So most of the time was me doing something I didn't enjoy, and that's definitely not how you should treat reading. The reading is a very personal experience. It should be something that you are enjoying what you're reading, or it's provoking some kind of thought in you or challenging you in a way that you hadn't been challenged before. It should not be to keep up and be popular and to know what's going on, because if you don't like it, then why did you read it in the first place? And that brings me to the second part, kind of bouncing right into that, is ask yourself why you're reading. For everybody, it's different. Some people it is for escapism. It is for just simple pleasure. They enjoy a riveting story that's going to be them. And for some people it's to learn things. For some people it's to be moved and to experience these deep emotions in ways they hadn't thought about it. And some it's just to understand culture, because obviously literature is the foundation of what a culture's building. So like I said, there's so many different reasons to read and so many different purposes that you can have while reading that you really need to know what you're doing and what the purpose of it is. Some people want to read for just personal growth, and that's all right. And some people want to read for pleasure, and that's all right. Everybody's got their reason, but you should know yours. And that's something I think is super important when it comes to making yourself enjoy reading. And if you don't know your reason for reading, it can definitely put you into a slump super quick, because when you lose a purpose for reading and you're just reading random shit all over the place, you're not going to enjoy it and you're going to give up reading. And I think that's the issue with a lot of people, and why they have trouble getting into reading is because they don't really know why they're reading. They don't know what they're supposed to be reading to fulfill their why, and it can fucking suck. So connect with your why. I hope that if you've been through a slump, you at least relate to one of these, or you've used one of these, or I hope that if you are in a slump right now, that one of these 8 tips is going to be a good way to kind of push you out of that slump. I hope that you can find some solace in this, to know that we've all been there when it comes to slumps. And if you're watching this and you're not in a slump right now, remember these 8 tips, because hopefully you never go through a slump, but one day if you do, you'll be able to pop back here and find one of these 8 tips useful. That's all guys. That's all right, guys. That's all I got for you today. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the future with more consistent content. And thank you for watching. Until next time, stay reading, y'all.